so excited to have this conversation with JC Sandberg from ACP, otherwise known as
American Clean Power.
Incredible. This conversation is really talking about the future of clean energy in America and clean energy jobs, talking about the landscape with an expert on the ground to give advice to job seekers on how exactly we navigate this moment and why clean energy jobs are still on the horizon, need to be protected, and are going to continue to thrive regardless of whatever's happening in today's landscape. So, JC Sandberg is the Chief Policy Officer at the American Clean Power Association, otherwise known as ACP. He leads ACP's policy and legal teams, and his teams provide best in class policy and analysis, serving as the foundation for the industry's advocacy efforts. Prior to this role, he served as ACP's Chief Advocacy Officer, leading the industry's advocacy around the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as industry efforts to shape IRA implementing rules and regulations. And even prior to that as well, he led global government affairs and policy at GE Renewable Energy. In this role, he was instrumental in the global growth of the company's onshore and offshore wind grid, hydro, and storage businesses, and he played an active role in the establishment of policy and regulatory frameworks enabling the accelerated deployment of renewable energy in domestic and foreign markets. And I think it's so incredible to get to talk to an expert who's on the ground, especially when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act. As a content creator and environmental educator online, and now building a platform focused on green jobs, I did so many videos, advocating for the IRA and then, advocating around how important of a policy it was to be able to bring good green jobs to Americans around the world, and especially here in America. And I think it's just amazing to get to meet someone who was like really on the ground, understanding that landscape, because we really want this to be a hopeful conversation. And so, you've had the front row seat to the clean energy transformation from your time at GE to leading policy at ACP, and obviously, as I mentioned before, the Inflation Reduction Act. So we're now potentially facing a very different federal landscape given major shifts and cuts this past year. I'm wondering, in your opinion, what does this policy uncertainty mean for the industry and the workers within it?
So first, I want to say thank you for having me, and also for our kids. My cool factor is going to go up if I'm on YouTube, so I'm very excited about this. Uh, I think this is we're an incumbent industry, and so what does that mean? That means we're a big, important domestic industry, and we produce a lot of power in the U.S. And I think that in 22, when we had the Inflation Reduction Act and everything felt like it was happening, um, at the time, the future was bright, and I don't want to kill that. I think the future is still bright. I think as you said, Christy, we've faced a little uncertainty, but I think the industry will ride through it. And we'll ride through it because we're an incumbent industry. There's a couple of factors at work in our favor. One is a very big one, which is demand for power in this country is through the roof. So whether you're for all of the above or for clean or for whatever, there's plenty of demand for electrons to go around. The other thing is that consumers and businesses, they still want green power, green electrons. The other thing I would say is that it's important to remember that electrons don't have political persuasion, but the people that make decisions do. And so I think it's important to remember that, especially at this time when there is so much load growth or a demand for power, that we need every electron we can get. And that's why if you're seeking a job in this industry, I would say we're bullish on the industry, and we continue to be. And I don't think that's naive or it's messaging or anything like that. I think that the dynamics on the ground are good for clean energy, and they will continue to be for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely, absolutely. Snaps a lot. I love that. You represent over 800 companies in this industry from wind, solar, storage, and transmission. So I'm wondering, what are these companies telling you about their biggest pain points, especially now in scaling their operations and their ability to create jobs given these roadbacks?
So I think it's less about the rollbacks, Christy. It's more about how do they get projects in the ground. And so it takes a very long time in this country to develop any kind of infrastructure, and energy infrastructure is no different. And so one of the things I think that if we're talking about politics, that every political persuasion can get behind is getting infrastructure in the ground faster. And so, what does that take? That takes both sides coming together. And that means that if we facilitate acceleration of the deployment of clean energy, there might also be the acceleration of deployment of infrastructure to move natural gas, right? But at the end of the day, the market makes those decisions, and the market and consumers want clean energy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And, given those industry challenges, I love your optimism. I need it. I'm sure everyone else in this audience needs it. But, given the industry challenges, like, what do you think job seekers should know about the reality of working in clean energy right now? Which segments of the clean energy industry do you see as the most stable for workers to participate in right now? And which areas might face more volatility?
Okay, so I think the area that's probably most stable is the operation of for projects. So whether it's a wind farm or a solar facility or a storage facility, there's a lot of infrastructure already in the ground creating electrons. Those projects have to be operated, and so the industry's always looking for wind techs. It's always looking for solar techs. I think the one place where there's a little volatility now as the market finds its way after a kind of the latest hiccup is the construction side and how projects, I think for 25 and 26, Christy, those projects are largely kind of, they can see their way to the finish line. I think when we look beyond that in 27 and 28, it's not that they're going to go away. It might just take a little bit for them to ramp back up again. So, but I do think operations jobs are there. I think we are looking at ways to kind of standardize the skill sets for things like wind technicians, for things like solar techs, so that you if you get jobs in those spaces that you're what's the best way to say it? You can move around, right? You can move from one facility to another. You don't need to have be retrained by the second facility. That you have a basic set of skills that make you super employable to a broad landscape of projects. And so I would say again, full circle operations, a great time to be in the space. I think we'll see the construction for 25 and 26 largely set and moving. And I think we'll see what 27 and 28 bring.
Incredible. That's very practical advice. And diving deeper into that, something we like to bring up a lot at the Green Jobs Pavilion is diving into green skills, because I think it's important to talk about roles, but I think it's even more important to talk about skill sets, right? Because if we really want to get more folks to get a foot in the door and even think about transferable skill sets, I think a lot of people are curious, what are the types of skills and roles that these companies are most desperate to fill? And, what do you think is making it hard to maybe find those qualified workers? So I know you were talking about operations and things like that. Are those roles that you need a college degree to fill? Like, what is the type of technical expertise someone would need? Or what do you see as challenges in that?
So I think there's two different there's I don't think every job needs a college degree. I think there are plenty of jobs, vocational jobs, technical jobs that can be had with some basic training. I think the people that operate these projects, the manufacturers that build the wind turbines and the solar panels, are willing to train the workforce because they have to. I think as we look at the larger project developers, I think they're looking for creative problem solvers. And so people that come to work every day, this is an industry that is incredibly mission driven. And I think that's both a strength, but I think sometimes it's also a weakness because that being mission driven, sometimes we don't see the problems that are like kind of way back there in the rearview mirror, but they're coming, right? And so how do we be creative? How do we be problem solvers and stay ahead of it? There's jobs for engineers and lawyers and accountants. They're every level of employment in the industry. I think it's just finding your niche and then being willing to like just throw yourself into it.
I love that advice. And building off of that, you've worked in policy since 2001, and you have a powerful personal story about your work after 9/11. And through multiple political transitions, you've been doing this work. So, what gives you confidence or concern about the current political, changes that are happening right now with clean energy? And how do you feel like the industry can weather even in this storm that we're in today?
I'd be less than, I think, genuine if I said there haven't been some road bumps over the last many months. But I do think what you're seeing is that an industry that is resilient, an industry that is here to stay for the long term, an industry that is material to the power generation in this country. And so, I think it's again, it's the perfect storm of uh, demand and everybody needing every electron that they can get, and then a little bit of political headwind. I think we'll ride through that. I do. I think we're actively working to ride through that. And I think that outside of in Washington D.C. they call it the Beltway. So outside of the Beltway, outside of D.C., where to the states and local communities, I think that is where a lot of work is being done and will continue to be done to talk about the positive economic impacts, the job impacts, the local hospital that gets to stay in the community, the firehouse that gets built as a result of these projects, the impacts on the tax base. It's all a virtuous cycle and a good news story. It's just, we just have to kind of stay the course.
No, I appreciate that. I think a lot of people underestimate the power of state and local opportunities because I think we're even seeing in New York State, even despite all the rollbacks, there's still a lot of thriving industries and infrastructure that needs to be built to address the demand for power generation, as you're talking about. And so I'm wondering, looking ahead 3 to 5 years, how do you see the clean energy job market evolving? I know that's a crazy question to ask right now, but we're gonna throw it out there. And but I want to ask, like, if you could maybe predict a little bit of it from what you're seeing, how do you see it evolving? And what do you think people entering this field should be prepared for?
I think it's moving in a positive direction. And I don't want, when I say that, Christy, I don't want you to think I'm just being a shameless promoter or a cheerleader for the industry. I genuinely believe the market fundamentals are there to support my optimism. I think as we look 3 years out, we can kind of see the pipeline. When we start to get to the edge of 5 years, we wonder. But I don't think demand is going anywhere. And so long as there's robust demand, we're in this race to win the AI race with data centers that have incredibly voracious appetites for power. You're seeing that happen to the point where utilities are starting to wonder how do they manage that appetite for power and serve the rest of the load. And so I think the future of power and the demand, I think, for the next 3 or 5 years will be consistent and consistently needing more. And so in against that backdrop, I think to this point in the year, about 93% of the power deployed this year has been clean because we're what's in the queue, right? 91% of the power deployed in the entirety of last year was clean because that's what consumers wanted. And so I don't foresee that we will fall off into the ocean. I think we will still be a material part of the generation mix and of the new deployment for the next 3 to 5 years.
So just hang on tight.
You got to it's just like any industry. I mean, you have to incumbent industries face challenges. I think you're starting to see um, if you were on the fossil side, you felt like one political administration put you through some challenges the last 4 years. The clean industry is feeling it a little bit this time, but I think at the end of the day, that again, the economic development and the deployment of capital and the things that are necessary to make this go went out. Now, with the current uncertainty, that sends a terrible market signal. But I do think that um, cooler heads will prevail. That if we had this discussion next year, and I hope you'll have me back, that hopefully we'll have that same positive story, and I think we will.
I totally, totally agree. And my last question, which is my fun question that I ask everyone who comes onto Green Jobs Word and the Pavilion, is if you could give your younger self when you're first starting out your career some early career advice, what would it be?
Well, we were talking earlier. We have a teenage daughter, and one of the things that we've been really talking to her a lot about is she needs to advocate for herself. And so I would say to you, as someone who has employees on a team at all levels of seniority, when you're young, you got to advocate for yourself because no one else is going to do it for you. And the other thing we teach our kids and is you can do hard things. And so don't be afraid to think I'm not perfectly qualified for that job. Just raise your hand. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. And again, got to always advocate for yourself.
Thank you so much. And we do have time for like one or two questions if anyone wants to ask anything.
My question was, so I'm Raj Mathur. I'm a commissioning engineer myself, so I test MEP systems for new construction buildings. My question was, do you see higher and higher degrees are needed in the energy sector and sort of in the data side of things? And do you think that people would have to study more in the future to get jobs?
Okay, the question was, do I think like data jobs and like higher advanced degrees will be more necessary in the future? I think that there'll be a range of employment opportunities across the industry, especially we're bringing more and more manufacturing back to this country. So there's it just in a factory. I was just in one yesterday in Schenectady, New York, seeing GE's factory making very large wind turbines, 6 megawatt machines, huge. And there are all levels of employee there, right? From the data scientist you're asking me about to the engineer to the people on the plant floor actually making the things happen. So I think that that's going to continue, and I think what happens is those opportunities grow as we bring more of that back to the U.S.
This is not exactly a jobs question, but when it comes to like investing, especially like I think of my parents, they're currently investing in Shell, gas and oil. They are getting great dividends from that. What's the case you make? What are like the top talking points for like switching to investing in oil and gas to investing in clean energy for people who know nothing about
So
it?
the way that you probably access the market for clean energy is largely through utilities. There are some manufacturers that are publicly traded. GE is one big one. Siemens, Vestas, First Solar. There's some very large manufacturers that are publicly listed. There are also utilities that are kind of at the leading edge of buying and procuring clean power. And then there are the data center folks and all those. So there are ample investment opportunities. There are clean funds. There are all kinds of stuff. Um, and it's just a different kind of investing, right? It's probably more growth investing than it is kind of your traditional dividend investing, which is, um, and those, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but that's kind of they're clean funds. We're happy to talk to you after about some of the utilities that are the most invested in clean.
Yeah, hi, my name's Benea. I work with solar policy initially, but recently transitioned into sustainability specialist for a global logistics company. Since your title as chief policy officer, I'm curious, like, how is it going on the policy side? Because one of the main reasons why I left, because I got laid off from the solar job, and I heard that the solar industry right now is a bit on the downer side on the policy side, and they're more looking into like the heavy data tech side. So, what are your opinions on the current situation, the possibly future situation on the policy side on clean tech
For pure policy jobs.
for pure policy jobs? Yeah.
Okay, the question is, what do I see as the universal policy jobs? There's a mix of opportunities. I think that depending on the industry, the solar part of the solar industry you're in, there are opportunities. I think at the federal level right now, those policy jobs are really hyper focused on a couple things. One is permitting reform. So we talked earlier how we get those projects in the ground. The other thing are regulatory actions, right? So a lot more for the lawyers, candidly, than I'm a reformed lawyer. So more for the lawyers. And then data and analytics, right? So those are the three. Sorry, I'm going to leave out a couple, and I don't want to do that. Trade, which is kind of a really specialized skill, tariffs and those types of things. But I think that there's opportunities in the policy space if that's your passion. I think sometimes you have to like maybe take a little detour just so you keep a job because it's easier probably to deal from a position of strength from an employer's perspective if you already have a job. But don't lose the passion, right? Maybe sometimes there's a little detour that has to be taken. I took a big long one. I went to a law firm for 8 years after I left a Senate job as a Senate lawyer. I didn't think that I was going to be there for even 5, right? And then I found my way back to GE. So I would say you'll always take professional detours. Just what's your North Star and then go figure it out.
I love that. Can we give him another round of applause?